Gen 13, more like Gen... Am I right? Hello, hello, hello! You're watching the most popular show on YouTube, hosted by Sean Crummell. I am Sean Crummell, of course, back with another review. This week we're looking at Gen 13, as promised, created by Jim Lee, Brandon Choi, Alex Garner, and J. Scott Campbell. Jim Lee worked for the big two, DC and Marvel, for a while and got wrapped up in that Image Comics thing in the 90s, where several top talents from the industry walked out to start their own company. Jim is now one of the biggest big shots at DC Comics. His childhood friend Brandon Choi helped him co-create a number of titles at Wildstorm. Alex Garner does some pretty crazy illustration work. You should check out his website. J. Scott Campbell works to this day, from what I've seen, mostly doing covers for Marvel books and sending me emails about buying his work online. It's a joke, I subscribe to the newsletter. J. Scott Campbell is also responsible for one of my newfound favorite comics, Danger Girl, which I will definitely review in the future along with all the McFarlane action figures. McFarlane. Gen 13 itself came out from Image Comics under Lee's Wildstorm imprint label in 1998. Here's a couple of cool pictures from the back cover. Alright, let's go! Prelude in Chapter 1. The story starts out in 1979 in the pouring rain as a wife and husband flee with their two kids, Matthew and Nicole. They're pursued by comic book style stormtroopers that gun the wife down from a helicopter type vehicle. And this is the first of a good number of these to come. I'm sure this wasn't a problem in the floppy periodical version of the comic when it was in stores, but collected as a trade you end up losing artwork unless you're willing to break the spine of your book to see the full image. And I'm kind of obsessed about keeping my books as nice as possible, so yeah, this stinks. The wife is gunned down by troopers and the husband turns with fire data in his eyes and the whole thing explodes. The use of his powers is too much for him, and he tells Matthew, wearing his Darth Vader t-shirt before it was just a fad to be a fan of something, to protect his sister. The troopers arrive, and Matthew and Darth Vader watch as they gun down his father. A little bit of foreshadowing there, I think. Nah, he'll probably grow up to be totally well-adjusted. Meanwhile, in 1994, Kaitlin Fairchild is heading back to her dorm room, contemplating the numerous internships she's applied to. And let's just take a minute to appreciate these background characters here. Butt Rash. Sounds like a great band. Tank. And Hot Dog Guy. I assume that's a hot dog. Fairchild lives with a typical high-maintenance, trashy roommate with questionable morals. And she's heading out, telling Fairchild not to be there when she gets back with her date. Later, Kat wakes up to a knock on the door and is greeted by three totally not evil-looking government dudes that tell her she's been accepted to an internship and she needs to come with them right away. Elsewhere, John Lynch is talking to Ivana Beol, the head of SciTech, the scientific division of international operations. He's there to find out why she's requisitioned some of his Black Razor troopers, since the last time they were needed in such a way was for the Genesis Project. Insert musical sting here. She tells him she's authorized to restart Genesis under the Gen 13 program, despite what happened to Team 7 and Gen 12. That will hopefully make more sense later on. Basically, Lynch doesn't like it at all. Elsewhere in the facility, Matthew, from the beginning of the story, now known as Threshold, is all grown up and training with several martial arts masters, until he loses his temper and explodes the head of one of the guys. His sister, Nicole, looks on with one of her manservants. Hey, look at that, comics are inclusive. This shot was hilariously surprising to me, actually. Turn the page and boom! But I suppose that fits her character and works as a fine visual introduction. She makes some strange, inappropriate passes at her brother, and then the scene moves on. Lynch later finds Threshold and asks him to report on the project to keep him informed, as he's currently looking for his lost son. Threshold turns him down, and we're back to Kaitlin being shown around the facility by a large stereotypical German woman. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Percival Edmund Chang, also known as Grunge, as he careens into Fairchild while running away from getting a shot. Roxanne Spaulding, soon to be known as Freefall, and Bobby Lane, later to be known as Burnout, also make their first appearances. Then, Trenchbull puts them through mental and physical tests in a fashionable montage. And hey, first appearance of Exercise Bar! See the last action figure review on this channel to get that reference. Soon, Ivana, Nicole, and Threshold hold a conversation about Kaitlin and Grunge being the last of all the subjects to exhibit signs of superpowers. She orders them to up their dosages, and if nothing comes of it, to dispose of them. It also bears mentioning, if I forgot to, that there are other test subjects within this program, but the comic primarily focuses on the main characters. That night/morning, Fairchild is feeling sick, no doubt from the up dosages of whatever it is. She heads into the hallway to find the infirmary. I love this layout. Silhouettes are often used to save the artist time, but in my own stuff I like to throw them in to break up the frames. I love that it's tilted to the side and only a couple of things have details. We see that Kaitlin is kind of out of it and leaves a dent in the solid wall from her grasp, completely unawares. She steps into a room with a giant computer and sees her father's name on the screen. Suddenly, Grunge appears from the ceiling, hanging like a monkey, followed by Roxy, who explains that it's the only place there aren't any cameras and where they can be alone. I assume the two of them are together at this point. In her surprise, Fairchild has tripped an alarm, and it's not long before a guard shows up to knock some heads. Knocking Grunge out cold, and Roxy springs to his side. Kaitlin is clobbered a second time when her gen factor finally kicks in. Here's another one of those pages. This might actually make a cool poster if you have the issue and are willing to pull it out, but again, in a trade paperback, or if you're planning on writing a story meant for this format, the double-page spread just doesn't work. I can't recall, at least at all at this time, any other instances where I've seen a double-page spread turned on its side in a comic. I'm sure they exist. You just don't see them very often. I appreciate the uniqueness of it, regardless. As long as it was on the centerfold, it would definitely be an incentive to buy 2 copies. Chapter 2! Suddenly, we're on the run! What the man? Last I knew, we were standing nude in the hallway having beaten the snot out of a stormtrooper. But we're running with some new gray-haired dude who has that techno firepower in his eyes like that father at the beginning of the comic. Except his power looks grape-flavored. His name is Tom, and he says it's time to take a stand, and the pilots in the pursuing vehicle go down and explode. Bobby Burnout is totally into it and causes his own carnage. And Fairchild, acting more out of the need to lose their pursuers, chucks a rock at another vehicle. Is it me, or is that kind of a weird choice for shading? It'll come up again later. Another ship lands and the troopers jump out. I really like this shot. I believe it's J. Scott Campbell drawing this, and he really captured the angle well. They shoot a 90s action figure capture cable at Roxy and she goes down. Grunge is unable to help her, as he is yet to still manifest any powers, so Sarah Rainmaker steps in. Also, Sarah Rainmaker is actually her name because she is an Apache, descended from Geronimo. I assume with a name like Rainmaker she controls the weather, but she hits these dudes with a blast of wind that buries them in sand. Another trooper gets the drop on her and she's flung into the air as Roxy finally manifests her powers of telekinesis. Fairchild thinks they should help the wounded and argues with this new guy that says they're on the run because of her. As a side, I like this art even though it has some issues. Here is where we get a brief recounting of what happened after the end of the last chapter. We see Fairchild manifested and the 3 of them running from a group of guards in the coal. Fairchild tears open a wall as Burnout and the others torch nearly all the other bad guys. Then they all flee on a thermal updraft. Upon landing, Fairchild gets her iconic green bikini given to her by Tom. Tom convinces everyone but Fairchild to go back to the base and basically get revenge. Fairchild says she doesn't remember Tom being part of the test group previously, and I don't blame her, cause neither do I. And he says he was one of the guards that happened to show superhero potential, and he had to break out, thus turning his attention to an injured trooper and exploding his head. Fairchild refuses to go along with him, and she parts ways with the rest of the group. Elsewhere, Ivana and Nicole share a drink while discussing Threshold, while Tom is currently leading everyone back into the base. When suddenly, gasp! Tom is Threshold! And somehow his hair changed and he got his eye patch back. I have no clue where it came from. But he fries everyone. Threshold and Nicole stand over them victorious, and Roxy sends a telepathic message to Fairchild before blacking out. The next morning, Fairchild wakes up in the desert and is hit with a psychic blast from Roxy. Why she didn't hear it immediately last night is anyone's guess. And yow! Look at those legs and feet! I believe it is J. Scott Campbell drawing here, and thankfully he vastly improved over the years. Another double-page spread that doesn't work but looks cool, and she's on her way to rescue her friends. Chapter 3! Fairchild hangs out on the side of a mountain, observing a heavy-duty truck being driven into the facility that is apparently located on another planet. I'm kidding. Some soldiers lift a crate into the facility, and Ivana comes to inspect, when John Lynch shows up to tell her protocol dictates that he take his subject to the nearest facility, until it can be transported elsewhere. Ivana's facility just happens to be the closest. Outside, Fairchild stands ready to enter the building, guns blazing. Inside, some guards get the drop on her, but she is more than capable of easily dispatching them. I love this angle. There's no reason for the image to be turned this way, but it just adds a little extra to make the page fun to look at. You get a little bit more banter between Lynch and Ivana as they discuss Threshold, who is currently somewhere else torturing our would-be heroes, specifically Grunge, who hasn't yet manifested his powers. The torture to bring on their powers did make me think of the Deadpool movie, but I'm sure that shtick has been used in other sources long before also. In yet another part of the facility, a boy named Timmy is haunted by reruns of Beavis and Butthead in a room decorated with Barney the dinosaur. It says that men dressed in black came to take him from his grandfather, but it doesn't say whether or not that was Lynch or Ivana's people. I assume Lynch because Timmy is related to what's in the crate, but Fairchild stumbles across him and takes responsibility for helping him escape the facility. In one more part of the facility, Nicole sits in front of a cell teasing their new guest from the crate with the key to his imprisonment. She sees Fairchild running by at that moment and psychically blasts her in her tracks. And that's when Timmy calls on our friend in the cell. Pitt! It's freaking Pitt! Pitt is another Image character created by Dale Keown and first appearing in Youngblood number 4. An incredible Hulk-like character dressed like a biker with long black claws. Pitt easily breaks his bonds in a double-page spread that doesn't work but looks cool, and strides over to Timmy, who lays unconscious. Kaitlin assumes the worst and tackles Pitt, crashing into a wall, and a super strength versus super strength fight breaks out. Pitt is thrown off by her strength and makes a comment to a character that I think lives in his head named Chakran, about females being the weaker sex. Cue the obligatory girl power line, and Kaitlin nails him in the crotch. And, oddly, because I like Fairchild so much as a character and she's superpowered, I'm okay with this. She lifts Pitt over her head and heaves him! Oh, jeez, I thought that was gonna, throw him into the sun or something, but he just kind of plops over on the side. Anyway, this makes Pitt go into Mr. Furious Hulkamania mode, and he tells Chakran they're gonna do things his way now. As if they hadn't been doing that all along. Grunge is coming to religion, and Roxy starts freaking out over his torture. So Threshold starts torturing her also. And Grunge finally loses his manifesting in a fashion where he absorbs materials around him, and clobbers Threshold, knocking him out cold. Hey look, Grunge Butt, you're welcome, ladies. And who said comics weren't inclusive? The team gets dressed and Grunge is walking like an upright ape. I don't know what it is. At random times throughout the comics' overall run, I feel like the artists that were writing, or drawing, sorry, artists don't write, they draw. I feel like the artists were under the impression that Grunge was some kind of a dwarf. But I digress. Pitt and Kaitlin come crashing into the control room and lay at the mercy of Lynch and Ivana. Then, in true campy comic book cliffhanger, Lynch tells them to fire on his mark. Whereas in the next chapter, he behaves completely the opposite. Chapter 4! Ivana demands these Black Razor stormtroopers shoot both of them, which I don't suspect would really have any effect on two superheroes, and takes matters into her own hands instead. Kaitlin sweeps the leg Johnny as more troops burst through the door. Up above, the rest of the heroes find a hole in the deck and also come across Timmy, who explains that Pitt and Kaitlin had a misunderstanding and subsequent fight. The sound of soldiers from below is noticeable, and they decide to plasma blast the place before they head down. How this isn't going to kill Pitt and Kaitlin in their minds, I don't know. Double-page hero shot! Pitt is ready to fight them on arrival, but they go to work dispatching the troops. In a fit of showing off, Grunge tells Roxy that he's a master of Kung Fu, and that he doesn't even need his powers to beat these guys. And then he gets shot. Due to his new powers, though, Grunge sucks up the bullets and spits them out, which thoroughly impresses Roxy, who expresses, "That's Mondo rad." Mondo! Does anyone even say Mondo anymore? I'm gonna try and bring it back. I promise to use it incorrectly as much as I can from here on out. Pitt makes a huge Mondo leap back up to Timmy's level, where a guard has him. Pitt slashes off his helmet and the trooper tells him he's not afraid of him, which causes Pitt to make this face, and even I was Mondo weirded out by it. Great job. Timmy is finally reunited with Pitt and Chakran, and they make their escape from the complex a la Mondo Hulk jump. Is it recorded? Back downstairs, Lynch calls in the Black Hammers to combat the complex's troopers, and makes his escape with the Gen Teens. I mentioned campy comic book style earlier, so what better time than running away from certain death is there than now to ask for a complicated backstory and history? and Lynch provides. The teens all represent the final phase of Project Genesis, and Lynch used to run a group for the government called Team 7, made up of each of the kids' fathers. They were some of America's best soldiers, but the government wanted more and began exposing them to the Gen Factor, turning them into Gen 12. But check this out, I love this, that's Deathblow. Deathblow was one of the first things Jim Lee and Brandon Choi created at Image in 1993. Here he is crossing over in Jim Lee's Wildstorm universe. This is so awesome to me. Of course, you've seen superheroes cross over at DC in each other's books, but this was just a small, technically independent comic line, and he's emulating Marvel and DC. I think I just love the concept of a third comic company with the capacity for a larger universe. If you listened to a previous video, you heard me mention that this is basically my dream. To create an expanded universe in my sci-fi comic that branches off from the main story, and sees characters from the various stories either interacting or crossing paths, or even not interacting and just passing through the backgrounds of each other's story at the same moment. Of course, all done throughout comics, books, and whatever medium I decide. As a side note, they also ended up publishing a short series based on the Gen 12 team. Some survived the process, some went insane, and others fled and had families, and were hunted down like Threshold and Nicole's parents at the beginning of the book. Lynch tells them to jump down the garbage chute and escape, and God, that hand. Sharp little knife fingers. Yuck. The kids oblige, and boom! Chapter 5. Boom, 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 boom. They all landed in a dumpster, and this, while I was reading it, was my favorite part of the whole thing. Grunge getting hit in the head with this can. I know it's meant as if they knocked some stuff loose when they fell through, but I like the picture that there's a random guard walking past that had no idea what was going on the rest of the story, and just walked by finishing his drink and tossed it down the chute as he went, which ended up hitting Grunge in the head. Dumb, I know, but it made me laugh at the time. Suddenly, Threshold appears, completely conscious now, crackling with energy, and with a Mondo new outfit. Burnout jumps into action, hurling a fireball, which is batted back at him, taking him out of the game. Grunge is up next as Threshold does something to start breaking his arm, and he's down. But Kaitlin sneaks up from behind, and there's that shading again. Is it even necessary? Does it look strange to anyone else? It looks like a full leg sock to me. She leaps on his back and he flips her by the hair. On the roof of the base, Ivana is trying to make her villainous escape as her men load the remaining Gen experiments onto a helicopter. Lynch gets the drop on her and she tells him to shoot her. And he Mondo does! The blast ricocheted off her hand though and hits Lynch in his cybernetic eye. She says she's had some upgrades done. That is hard to say. And to use my own Star Wars reference, this bitch is
more machine now than man.
She uses her finger whips in a fit of equal opportunity and gets the best of Lynch, dragging him towards her and popping out freaking knives from her arm. Kaitlin and Grunge are being tortured as Roxy and Rainmaker try to come up with a plan, and Burnout is still out of it, as Nicole, in yet another revealing outfit, comes slinking up to him, now calling herself Bliss. Something is happening here, I guess, other than the obvious. I just don't know what. Maybe she's sucking up his power? But it doesn't matter because Rainmaker zaps her with what I assume is lightning and then plants her face in the dirt. Ivana makes to stab Lynch with her knife arms, and that is a J. Scott Campbell face if ever I've seen one. Lynch uses his powers of, Satan? To make Ivana's finger tentacles go wacky and tie her up. She makes her mustache-twirling escape with the help of her minions, and Lynch is left alone as the building counts down to explosion. Ivana watches the flames as she reveals her big plan of domination, and Threshold looks on in disappointment. Fairchild tells him it's over, but he has other plans. Before he's shot by Lynch and his team of Black Hammers. An ultimatum is given to leave with his sister, and he takes it saying he'll be back one day. The lead Black Hammer opens up and shakes Lynch's hand, since he's basically going to be an enemy of the organization now. But it doesn't matter, because he's made the decision on a double-page spread to act as a Mondo mentor to the kids now. You'd hope that's where the story ends, but no, f***ing Grunge pops in and tells you there's an issue number 0. What the heck, man? Quick update, look what just arrived in the mail. From there, you get a couple of sketchbook pages on a very 90s background, showing off character studies, page layouts, and hip 90s costume designs. Did you know there was an animated movie based on this very story? It had voice actors such as the Man, Mark Hamill, and John Delancey. Did you also know it never came out in the United States? What the heck? I ended up watching a little bit of it on YouTube, and it might have been for the best. They had Flea do the voice of Grunge, and yeah. I read Grunge as a surfer dude, but I don't read him as Flea. I really like this series. The chicks kick Mondo butt, but they're not obnoxious about it or feel the need to point out that they're girls, except for maybe that one ball shot with Pitt earlier. You can chalk that up to a natural response, though. The characters all look great together, and Fairchild is what class? A hottie boobalati. And Roxy's pretty great, too. Grunge is an idiot, but that's his character. I think if I have any criticism for the story, it's that there's practically no information about Burnout or Rainmaker. One thing that might have been good is if there was a moment to define each person's powers. I suppose that's left to future issues, but like Lynch, I have no idea what he's capable of. Threshold looks ridiculously overpowered, making people's heads pop all over the place, but then they also don't really use that ever again later on. Roxy, I get, is like Jean Grey type of thing that can use telekinesis. Fairchild is obviously the brainy Superman/Hulk. Burnout is like the Human Torch, and Grunge, I suppose, is like Absorbing Man. I have no idea what Rainmaker's deal is. My closest guess is like Storm from the X-Men. I did not see Fairchild using her trusty T797 laptop computer, though, nor did I see her use her Hyper Battle Cannon XR24L, though I suppose that was just their version of this thing? Or this one? So kids, this is the end, but fear not, it's not the last time we will be revisiting our favorite Wildstorm superhero bunch. There are other issues I'd like to go over and a couple of other crossovers, such as Superman Gen 13 and Spider-Man Gen 13, and I just found out about Fantastic Four Gen 13. Also, I have the first 9 issues of Pitt, and I plan on getting around to those in the near future as well. Also, I've needed an excuse to reread one of my favorite stories, Gen 13 Bootleg Grunge the Movie, where Grunge and Roxy get out of a movie and walk through a shopping mall type area, and he tells her how he'd make the perfect action movie. So far, from what I've read of the Gen 13 crew, it's a really great way to feel nostalgic for the 90s. Grunge the Movie totally reminds me of hanging out with my best friend in high school. Jim Lee has since sold Wildstorm and its characters to DC, which if he was going to do that, I'm glad that they got it, since I mostly prefer DC anyway. They've since incorporated them into the main DC universe with obvious changes to the characters' backgrounds. I have to admit though, I'm a little sad that this universe won't continue on in its own way. But what are you gonna do? What can I learn from this series from my own comic universe? From a technical standpoint, play with angles and layout. Don't be afraid to try new things just to make the page more appealing to the eye of the reader. Some of the line techniques too I should probably start messing with for instance, when they add a tiny bit of shading to the character, like under the chin. Not sure if that would take away from the animated series style, though, that I'm looking for. And last, it seems like it doesn't take much to make your universe feel bigger than it is. Just dropping a subtle reference here or there, or an image of a character from another story, will help build the world out. The hard part is getting more than one work finished. Speaking of which, I have some corrections on part 1 to finish finally. I'm off to do that. Take care, subscribe, tell a friend. Thanks for watching. Bye. MONDO!